Have you ever felt like no matter how much you love someone, you're living on two completely different worlds when it comes to money?
Yeah, like one of you is dreaming of adventures and the other is thinking about saving for the mortgage.
Today, we're diving into one of the biggest silent killers in relationships: money miscommunication.
And trust us, this doesn't blow up overnight. It builds quietly through missed conversations, buried dreams, and little resentments that pile up until it's too late.
We'll share the real story of a couple who loved each other, but still lost each other because they never had the money conversation they needed to.
And more importantly, we're going to break down how to avoid the same slow motion crash in your own relationship.
Because at the end of the day, it's not the money that tears people apart. It's the silence, the resentment. This is the Fi Guys. Let's get into it.
So we're back. We're back with another episode today, and this one is more important than most. I know we talk about money here on the podcast, and it's a very important part of our lives, but really some of the most important things in our lives are our relationships. And it's unfortunate that money plays such an important role in those relationships. Today we're talking about how we can kind of have those money conversations and make sure that we don't have that slow crash we talked about in the intro. So with that being said, Chris, welcome onto the pod. Dom, welcome onto the pod. Viewer, welcome onto the pod. But yeah, let's get right into it. Chris, where do we start with this one?
Well, Dominic, today I'd like to start with a story. So if you don't mind, go ahead and sit back, listener, sit back, and I'm going to dazzle you with a quick tale. So this is about Sarah and Mark. Sarah wanted to travel the world. Mark wanted to save for retirement. Every time she brought up buying a ticket, he reminded her of the mortgage, the bills, and the real life they had to maintain. For him, it wasn't cruelty, it was protection. A future built brick by careful brick. But for Sarah, it felt like suffocation. Eventually, she realized that Mark wasn't just saving money. He was saving it from the life she wanted. And Mark realized too late that while he was busy securing their future, Sarah had stopped believing that they had one. One rainy morning, while he balanced the checkbook, Sarah packed up her suitcase, bought a one-way ticket, and walked out of their world together. Their love didn't just end with a fight. It crumbled under quiet weight of two dreams pulling in opposite directions. So the reason I bring up this story is I brought it up many times in this podcast that I suffer with a lot of anxiety. And I also brought up in the podcast here in the past 2 weeks that we're going to be moving to San Diego here in a few weeks. And in that move, that brings up a lot more anxiety, a lot more money fears. And I've been noticing that me and my wife were almost drifting apart because we're not having these money conversations. When I heard this story of Sarah and Mark, I was able to easily put myself into these characters and be like, oh my God, that's what's happening. And what I need to do is before we get to that point, I need to have these money conversations. And this is someone who is a money professional who does this for a living, who is going through this. So today we're going to talk about that, talk about what this story represents, what we could do before it gets to that point where resentment builds because you never sat down and talked about what money meant to you, what our goals are, and how we can achieve them together.
Wow, that's a powerful story. It's a powerful story. Oh, and it's sad because this is something that every couple goes through. If you don't have conversations about money or, really everything, it's just going to fall apart. And I'm so glad that you're sharing this story with us today. And I'm excited to really learn what we can take away from this. And I don't want to ever be in this situation myself. And I don't want anybody else to be in this situation either. So thanks for bringing this story up, Chris. We appreciate that. What can we learn from this?
Well, I think the first thing we can notice is the different characters that each person's playing inside the relationship. Now, it's not to say that in every relationship, there's always going to be this dichotomy, this interaction, but there are some common characters that people play. For Sarah and for Mark, Sarah plays the dreamer. She's the person that wants to travel the world, wants to see more, wants to explore, fine with spending the money. We can deal with that later. And then there's Mark. He's the diligent saver, and he focuses on securing the future at the expense of the future. Neither one of these people are wrong, but since they're not communicating, they're never going to be right. So Mark thinks that he's protecting them by saying no to all of Sarah's big adventure ideas. Sarah feels like she's losing her life waiting for that someday that she doesn't know is ever going to come. Over time, we can hear in the story that resentment begins to build until eventually Sarah leaves with that one-way ticket, and that emotional distance that never got fixed remains. because both people never sat down, never talked about what money means. Big takeaway from this is that money fights are rarely just about money. They usually have to do with your values, security, freedom, adventure, stability. And that all starts with asking your partner, sitting down and actually having the discussion. What does money mean to you? Because I know when I had that first conversation with my wife and we sat down and I asked her that and she said, oh, adventure. And I was like, adventure? What are you talking about? Like money, security? How, like, we're not even seeing the same world here. And how many couples never have that discussion? They're both rowing in the same boat in opposite directions, feeling that each other are trying to harm each other, trying to stop somebody from living their dreams, when in truth, they're just trying to protect themselves. They're trying to help the other person. But since they never communicate about it, they never know. And then that's how the resentment builds over time.
Mm-hmm. It always seems like opposites attract in relationships. And I feel like rarely do you ever see two like people that are, oh, okay, like I'm just going to save. We're both going to save. We're on the same page, right? And maybe that is you, viewer. Maybe that is you, right? Maybe you're blessed to have, you and your partner are, oh, we're both adventurers, we're both savers, right? That doesn't mean that you still shouldn't have money conversations. I think you should have money conversations even more now, because you're both assuming you're going in the same direction. But I mean, like you said, Chris, I mean, the wife said adventure, this, you say security, right? It's like, you would have never guessed that, right? This is why we talk. This is why we have conversations. Because if you're making decisions with the wrong data, I mean, you're not going to be off by points. You're going to be off by miles, right?
Yeah, and it's so tough because in these types of things, these money disagreements that I work through with my clients that I've seen so often, both people think they're quote unquote doing the right thing. But without communication, their intentions do not matter, because to the other person, it feels that they're being sequestered, that they're being held down, that their dreams are being crushed. Resentment is a lot like rust. It builds up really slowly if you don't deal with it. And that dealing with it is that open communication. In truth, money silence kills relationships far more than overspending does.
Rust. Wow, that's a great analogy. That is a great analogy. So, with that analogy in mind, how do we deal with the rust?
I think it all comes down to communication. And I think you need to start these conversations early on in relationships. And I'm not saying like, hey, first date, let's sit down. Like, what are your goals, dreams? Tell me about your child relationship with money and all this stuff. But you do need to, at some point, once you decide like, hey, this is getting more serious, you need to talk about your dreams. You need to talk about your goals. You need to talk about your fears. And you need to talk about the trade-offs early and often, because we say it a lot on the podcast. You can have anything in life, but you can't have everything, especially when it comes to money. There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. And what you're willing to trade off versus what your partner's willing to trade off, what I'm willing to trade off versus what Dominic's willing to trade off, based off what our listener is willing to trade off, are all different. None of us are right. None of us are wrong. They're just different. It's not about agreeing on everything. It's about understanding each other and finding a shared path forward. But if you don't understand each other, how are you ever going to find that shared path? Because each one of you is inside of your own rowboat, or maybe even the same rowboat, trying to get to completely different destinations, actively working against each other, rather than just sitting down and having the hard money conversation that you need to have. And this is something that me and my wife, like, we do this often. We've talked about this on the podcast about how we have these constant money dates. Yeah. And last night we had to sit down again and have that conversation. We got to see from each other's view. So we've enacted this new practice where for 15 minutes, we try to be the other person. And you try to argue as if you're the other person, where I got to be my wife in a character. Like, hey, I want to book this trip. I want to spend this money. I want to do this, want to do this, want to do this. And my wife got to play the character of me, of being like, no, we can't do that because of this, 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 and this. And after we played that role for 15 minutes, just for pretend, we got to see the other person's point of view, got to see their humanity and see that they weren't working against us. We were both doing the best thing, the right thing. Without the communication, the intention didn't match. So it's a really good exercise that I would challenge our listeners to go ahead and set with their partners. And if they don't have a partner, set it with yourself. Dominic, earlier you said that it seems that often opposites attract. And I think that's true. And that's honestly a good thing. You want that dichotomy. You want that push and pull. Because if you have two people that are both like gun ho, let's just travel, let's F the future, we don't worry about that. Well, that's the person who is working at Walmart when they're 80 years old because they didn't save for their futures. So it's good to have that balance, because if you're too far to the left or too far to the right, there's pathology on both sides. But if you have people that are dialectically opposed, somehow they find the middle. And that middle is often where the truth lies, often where the right way for them lies, that middle path.
I just want to go back to the exercise you were talking about real quick. I think that's a very interesting exercise. And I think you should definitely come at it from a place of love and understanding. Because if you guys are already resentful and you come in like, oh, I'm going to play the wife, and my wife's going to play the husband, right? I could see it getting very toxic very quick because there's so much emotions involved. So always remember that it's like, hey, you love this person and they love you and they're not trying to hurt you and you're not trying to hurt them. And I think it's so important. I mean, like you show, Chris, I mean, coming from a place of love and understanding is the bedrock of every great relationship. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in on that.
No, I would certainly agree with that. And that's the issue with that, is that so many people, they let these resentment build because they're afraid to talk about money because they don't even understand it themselves. So who are they to talk about it with their partners? And we all kind of go through this. That's one of the big things that we have this podcast for. It's to normalize the conversation around money. You don't have to be a quote unquote money expert or money professional to talk about money. We need to talk about these things because when we're afraid of looking at it, that's how this monster grows bigger and bigger and stronger and eventually destroys relationships. So that means that if we have some practical takeaways, it's set regular money check-ins with your partner, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, as often as we possibly can, because we need to talk openly about our dreams. What does success actually look like to each person? Because if one of us success is living in the mountains of Montana and the other person's is sailing around the world, but they never talk about it, they never see how money can get us to these destinations, they're always going to be rowing in different directions. There's always going to be that resentment that builds. And that resentment builds very, very slowly. You have to make plans to both secure your future and to adventure because there's pathology on both sides. And if you're the person who's like, oh, only secure the future, that's like me. And I never live my life. And there's people like my wife who is always about adventure, but then she forgets to plan for her future. So the middle is somewhere that you have to find, but the only way you can find the middle is by communicating. Because if not, then it feels, and that doesn't mean that it actually is, but it feels like the other person is actively working against you. Mm-hmm. And how sad would it be that the person who is the diligent saver goes through their entire life trying to save money, try to save money so that eventually they can retire, eventually just to get a divorce. Yeah. And now looking back on it, that extra $500 or whatever to buy the upgraded couch or whatever looks like nothing at the face of divorce.
Yeah. You know, you said something that was kind of interesting to me, that, you know, you're the saver, right? You're Mr. Future, right? And the wife is Mrs. Today. And, you know, apart, you're like a level 5 in strength, we'll say, but together you're level 10. And I think it's so beautiful because it's like you need each other in order to unlock the best things in life. You're stronger together than you are apart by attitudes, right? By a lot. I love that. I think that's so inspiring for me, at least. To me, that's like the most inspiring thing that's been said today. It's like, wow, it's like yin and yang. It's literally like yin and yang. Like they're together. They are one. Like their power comes from each other. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in my own head right now, but I just think that is like so cool. Especially, you know, I've seen so much divorce in my lifetime, unfortunately. No, I have not been divorced. This is true, but just gotta preface that. But I think it's beautiful when you see two people who want to go in two different directions come together and say, no, as a couple, as a team, as a partnership, we're going to go in this direction for the best for both of us, so that you can be happy and I can be happy and we can compromise, we can move forward. I love that. I hope that we're all working towards that. Compromise isn't a bad thing. It's a good thing. It can be a good thing. And maybe that's like, I'll go for it, Chris. It looks like you're about to say something.
Well, I was going to ask you, why do you think that so many couples avoid these conversations, avoid talking about money, avoid just saying like, hey, this is when you do that, when you spend that money, when you bring up these trips, when you tell me that I need to make more, this is how it makes me feel. Why do you think there's so many people are afraid to just have that honest conversation?
I think there's probably 2 reasons, maybe more, but we'll start with just two reasons. One, I think it's easier to stay silent. It's easier to pick the easy road. I mean, like you've taught us so many times, Chris, right? The easier choices equals a harder life. The harder choices equal an easier life. And people want that rush of dopamine. They want that good feeling. They don't want to feel like, hey, look, we don't have enough money this month. We don't have a future financially if we don't do this. Nobody wants to have those conversations because it's not fun. It's not sexy. It's not a romance novel. Secondly, I would also say that it stems from childhood. If your parents aren't used to giving you these tough conversations, if they always beat around the bush and you were raised in a bubble, right? It's going to be a lot harder to have these conversations. I think it's so important to not blame your parents though for your adult life and your adult decision, right? You got to take extreme ownership for your life. And tough conversations are the way through the storm. Don't get stuck in the storm. If you get stuck in the storm, you're going to be there for a damn long time and you might not get out.
I can tell that you and I have spent a lot of time together because you took the words right out of my mouth. That's exactly what I would say. The people often avoid these money conversations because it's hard. It's hard to sit down and talk about this. It's hard to talk about your feelings. It's hard to talk about your past. It's hard to talk about all these things. Most people don't even know what money means to them. They never even know that for themselves. So how are they going to express it to a partner? But if you don't know it for yourself, sometimes the best way to find that is to have that discussion with your partner. Because maybe sometimes you might sit down with your partner and be like, hey, what does money mean to you? And you might right now, a listener might be thinking like, oh, I know what money means to me. But you don't really say it. But when you actually say it out loud for the first time, you discover that maybe you don't know what money means to you. Maybe you've always just kind of felt something. You had a feeling that you took for truth. But when you actually have to express words to it, say actual words, you realize that you don't know. And maybe your partner doesn't either. And you guys can discover what that means together for both of you. If you avoid those hard money conversations now because you want to keep the peace, because you want things to be copacetic, because you're going to be the strong person who's going to bear and grit it, you're setting yourself up for far more heartbreak later. Like Dominic said, you make the easy choice, you're going to have a hard life. But if you make the hard choice, you're going to have an easier life. And yeah, sometimes it sucks to make that hard choice, to stand there at the precipice of, am I really going to sit here and talk to my spouse or my partner or my best friend or whatever about money, about the way that it makes me feel when they do something, or the way that I feel when I do something that makes me, that everything on my alarm bells start to go off? Yeah, you need to do it at some point. And to your point earlier, Dominic, that sometimes emotions are going to get heated. You need to also be able to step away for a little bit. I think that's so important. And that's something I always want to make sure that we bring up in these conversations with relationships, is sometimes you need to take a walk around the block. If you start to feel your emotions angering up and you don't know how to express them, you don't want to say something you're going to later regret. So take a second, walk around, collect your thoughts, and then go back to the conversation. Just because you start a conversation, it does not mean it needs to end right there and then. Ideally, this relationship is for the rest of your lives. You have the rest of your lives to deal with that, to figure it out. And just from someone who's been on this journey for a long time with my wife and on this journey of life, the journey never ends. You never actually reach the destination. So you have a long time to play this infinite game and try to figure it out together.
That's beautiful. There's so many things in there that I want everybody to just like rewind like 2 minutes and just listen to that again and then do that again. Because there were so many things in there that were like, oh, perfect, right? I loved so many of those, and I have them written down, so I'm gonna drop them on Friday. But I love that, Chris. That's super powerful. Question though, I know for me, terrible at starting conversations. Just terrible. You would think, because I'm so talkative, I'm great at starting conversations. But it's those hard conversations that I have difficult starting, because I'm the type of guy that's like, all right, I gotta build up the courage silently, and then I gotta spring it on them. Right? And that's terrible. You never want to spring a difficult conversation on someone. At least you might not want to. I'm probably going to defer to you, Chris, because you're the wiser one in this one. But how do you start that dialogue with your significant other rather than like, hey, let's talk about money? So, we're in debt. We're not doing well right now. Like, how do you, is it more like, hey, tonight let's have a money date or something like that? How do you go about it, Chris, for someone who's never done it? You're going to find a wife first, but that's the point.
First you got to find the spouse, then you do it. I wouldn't want you to jump straight to there. Just grab some random person off the street. Hey, we're doing this now.
We're doing this now. Okay.
But for me, you never want this to feel like a trap. You never want to feel like you sprung this on this person. Like, gotcha, you didn't see this one coming, did you? Because that's automatically going to put their walls up. And if their walls are up, you're not going to get through to them. So what I do is I never say like, hey, later on we need to have a conversation. Because now what was that other person going to do? Like, they're like, oh my God, I'm in so much trouble.
I hate that so
and they start
much.
going through their head trying to figure it out. So what I did with my wife for the first time, and now we just do it. Like, I don't have to like preface this, but if it was me for the first time, like, hey, I want to talk about our money later today. Like, this isn't going to be a bad conversation. It's going to be a really nice conversation. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So can we set up time later on to have dinner together? We'll go out, we'll talk about it. Yes. Cool. And maybe if you have some homework assignments, like, hey, how much have you spent this much? Do we have budget statements, things like that? Are you guys tracking your expenses? Do you know how much income's coming in? That's kind of a good place to start. Ideally, you have that information. If you don't, that could be something you can discuss on that first conversation. But when I sit down, it's always about hope. It's always about what you want out of life. Hey, tell me what's going well with our money. Tell me, what does money mean to you? What are we doing right now? Tell me in the next 6 to 12 months, what big trip do you want to go on? What thing do we want to purchase? Too often when you have these conversations with your spouses, at least from what I've seen, it's always negative. This is what you did that screwed up our relationship. This is what you did that screwed up our finances. Rather than, hey, this is what we're doing together really, really well. Because once you have that conversation about what's going well, what you dream about, what you aspire to, now once we have that on the table, this is the goal. This is what we want out of our life. Now we can say, okay, are we moving in that direction? And then we can have the real honest conversation about like, okay, I love that we want to go on this trip in the next 6 months. What do we have to do to get there? Oh, I think we need to save money. We need to do these things. We need to blah, 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 blah. Okay, what are we doing right now? And again, this isn't accusatory. It's all about the aim, the way that you try to come about this. Like, hey, what are we doing right now to attain that? And maybe you look down, you open up the spreadsheets, you look at the numbers and you're like, oh, shoot, we're spending more than we're making. The only reason we're floating by is we're just floating on credit cards. Most people, and sorry for using this word, but like unsophisticated people with money, they only look at their checking account. They base their entire financial health just on their checking account. Does my checking account have money in it? And is that growing? Yes, then good. It's like going to the doctors and them saying like, oh, don't worry, you have like a really good resting heart rate when you like just got out of a huge car crash and all your bones are broken. Like, you can't just look at one metric. You need to look at everything, because oftentimes when people have that checking account that's growing, their saving account is zero, their credit card balances are growing, they're making the minimum payments, but at least that checking thing is good. At least that's happy.
Yeah.
So you need to have a holistic view. You need to look at all of that. So again, just to answer your question real quick, Dominic, you start with telling your partner that you're going to have a money conversation. You're going to have a talk about your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations. Then you go into that. What are the dreams, hopes, and aspirations? Are we moving in the same direction? And if we are, or if we're not, let's try to find a middle ground together. And then how do we get there together? And are we moving in that direction, or are we moving very far away from it?
I love that. And with that being said, guys, we're going to be going and saying our action step for the day. And you're probably wondering, yo, guys, like, what's with the short pod? Well, we're actually testing out kind of a new format for us here at the Five Guys, where rather than, long drawn out 45-hour long podcasts, we thought maybe, what if we shorten them? People love condensed information in a great way. So we're going to be sticking to this and kind of testing it for a couple weeks. And if it sticks, it sticks. You'll see it. You'll know. If it doesn't, we'll see that as well. But with that being said, let's get to our action step, Chris. So what do we got for the action step? I mean, it's probably pretty obvious. I could guess it. You can guess it. If you can't guess it, probably weren't paying attention. So what's our action step for this week?
So this one's pretty simple. I want you to set time to have the money conversation that you've been avoiding with your partner. Set time aside, let them know that we're going to have this money conversation, open up the conversation. We've actually done a full podcast. I can't remember what number it is. You can go back and find it, all about how to have these money conversations, how to go through it. It was like an hour-long podcast. So if you need to, listen to that podcast too. But that's our action step of the week. Oh, go for it.
No, I just, you said something in the pod maybe about 15 minutes back that I really loved, that I just want to add on to the action step. And part of it's basically a question in the money conversation, but I loved it so much. I just wanted to make sure to point it out as well. But what is money to you? You know, you might have a knee-jerk reaction. Money is this. It's like, okay, cool, perfect, awesome. Lock it, put it in your pocket, go on a walk and think about it. What is money really to you? And really try to find the truest answer. I think that's the best place to start. That's where the whole conversation should start, right? But yeah, that's just my Dom's little anecdote for today. But yeah,
I love it. Well, Dom, thanks so much for joining us. Guests, thank you for joining us. Please let us know in the comments what you think about these shorter form podcasts. I really hope that it works out. It's going to free us some more time for Dominic and I, which is always wonderful, especially during these busy times. But we will see you this coming Friday at 5 Friday Feedback. If you got any value of today's episode, please like, subscribe, and tune in for next week. But most importantly, if you got any value today, please share the Fi Guys with one person. Let them know. That one person ideally should be your partner. And let them know that, hey, we're going to have this type of conversation. So maybe you should listen to these guys so you know that I'm not about to attack you when we do this. I want to make this a fun conversation. So until then, we will see you. Have a blessed day. We're the Fi Guys. Later.
peace.
This video podcast is sponsored by Monzon Wealth. The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered financial advice. We do not endorse specific products or services. Past performance does not guarantee future results. The opinions expressed are those of the hosts and guests, not the podcast sponsor.
It is crucial to consult with a qualified financial advisor or professional who can provide advice tailored to your specific needs before making any financial decisions, investments, or taking any other actions. If you are seeking specified help, you can reach out to Chris at monzonwealth.com.